Hello, and welcome to the North Coast Journal Preview, where we take a look at the stories being followed in the upcoming edition of the North Coast Journal. I'm your host, Dave Frank, and I'm joined by North Coast Journal's news editor, Thad Greenson. Thanks for joining me this week, Thad.
Thanks for having me, Dave. How are you?
Pretty good. I think there's like this general air around the community, talking to lots of different folks, that more vaccines are out there, and some people are starting to see light at the end of the tunnel and talk about, what's next. So I was thinking it'd be good if you just kind of give us a little update on from your end, what you're hearing about the state of vaccinations in our community.
Yeah, so there are, I think there are both encouraging signs, and then some causes for concern at this point. On the encouraging side, the vaccine allocations dipped down a little bit this week from last week, but continue to increase. And it seems like county is really ramping up the infrastructure to hold more clinics and really make vaccinations available to everyone that wants them, which is a huge step forward. On the, the kind of warning signs or red flags and causes for concern, there was a press conference with county officials this morning talking about this, all aspects of the COVID response, from epidemiology and business aid to vaccinations. And first, I guess I need to start out saying that our case numbers are going up again. Over the last couple of weeks, we've seen a pretty sustained increase in cases per day and test positivity rate and stuff, and still nowhere near where we were, back around the turn of the year in January and February, but, trending in the wrong direction. So it's a reminder that as hopeful as we all are and as good as some folks who are feeling vaccinated feel, this pandemic isn't behind us. Then on the vaccine front, there's some kind of frankly alarming news from my standpoint anyway, that the county has way more vaccine appointments available than are being filled. And I think we're about to reach the threshold of about half of the population that's eligible, which is now anybody 16 and over, has received at least one dose of the vaccine. But there are some signs that demand might be tapering off a little bit, and we might be getting into the territory where vaccine hesitancy becomes a real issue that the county needs to grapple with. Currently, for anybody watching this, through the myturn.ca.gov website, you can sign up for vaccination appointments in Humboldt County. I was on there this morning just trying to see what's available as far as appointments, and for the coming days, there are literally appointments at the Arcata Community Center for any time of day, through basically general business hours. I think it's 8 to 5 or 8 to 6, but there are a whole plethora of appointments available. So if you at all, feel comfortable getting vaccinated, the door is wide open for you to walk in there and get a shot.
So I did attend fairly recently a couple of different calls where public health officer or epidemiologist were presenting information, and it seemed like they didn't think we would run into that obstacle so quickly that for the foreseeable future there'd be a lot of folks taking advantage of it, but it sounds like that's not the case. Like it's going to have to transition to a phase where outreach and persuasiveness, communications becomes part of the agenda. Any observations about how that might roll out? Yeah,
I mean, I think that you're right that the expectation was that we'd still be in a territory where demand, far outpaced supply, which was the case up until really the last week or two. So obviously a couple weeks ago, Humboldt County, took the leap of making everybody 16 and over eligible, which, all of a sudden brought, tens of thousands of people into the eligible pool. And the expectation was that was going to, keep demand really high. So it was still going to be hard to find appointments. And at that point, public health was really urging patience that people, might have to wait, a month or even more to get a vaccine. And I think that absolutely. I think that this hit a bit sooner than they were expecting. Dr. Hoffman in a press conference this morning was saying that, he has a couple of theories about why we might be in this period that we're in, saying that he thinks that There were some problems with a geofencing function on the My Turn website that it only allowed people to if they included their zip code when signing up, it only allowed people to sign up for a clinic within 40 miles of their residence or of their zip code. And so he was thinking that might have posed complications for some people. And then he also had this theory that we've gone from this climate of scarcity where there were fewer vaccine doses than and appointments than demand. And into a kind of a period of abundance where all of a sudden everybody is eligible and there really are a plethora of doses, and maybe the public is just having a hard time kind of making that transition and catching up to the idea that if I want a shot I can get one. I don't know that either of those, would affect kind of enough people to really explain the what we're seeing currently of having really thousands of open appointments in the next handful of days. So I think you're right that we are transitioning into a period where, whether it's people having real conversations with their healthcare providers about whether this vaccine is right for them and kind of approaching it from a personal decision standpoint, or if it's messaging from public health about the communal impact of getting people vaccinated. That this isn't just an individual decision. This is really one that affects your neighbors and your entire community, and our ability as a county to get back to some semblance of normalcy as far as having businesses open and operating regularly, and schools open and operating regularly in the fall, and all those kinds of things.
Well, cool. Thanks for your insights on that. We will circle back around to this on the regular. I know it's front and center, but it's also, it's one of those things where it's hard to, you got to look away every once in a while, but thanks for keeping an eye on the prize for us.
Absolutely. And I'll just add it real quick on a personal note. I am getting my second dose of vaccine on Friday. I'm super excited to be done. And I'm super excited 2 weeks after that, when I have, full immunity, to go get my hair cut, which has been like 14 months coming. So.
Oh, my goodness. So it's funny because I actually, in the past couple of weeks, spoke to two other folks who said the exact same thing. As soon as they got their second shot, and waited 2 weeks, they went and got their hair cut. I obviously don't have that issue, but I am also getting my second shot on this Friday. So nice. I'm starting to see some light, and I think that's a really great way time here in our conversation to transition to your cover story. It's an in-depth story called "The Lost Year: Humboldt's Musicians on Pandemic Silence" by Colin Yao. So tell us a little bit about that, and kind of what was COVID's impact on musicians and live performances in our community.
Yeah, so first of all, I'm so thankful for Colin writing the story for us. I think he did an outstanding job. For those who don't know, he used to write our regular music column about what live performances were going on every week, and he's a very vibrant writer and very in tune with the music scene. And obviously, we've missed having that in our paper as this dearth of live performances over the last year. So for the story, I mean, he really tried to talk to as many kind of performers as possible in Humboldt County, people who maybe don't make their livelihoods playing music, because those are pretty few and far between in Humboldt. As really music is kind of a passion and a side hustle for most of the local musicians that we know. But really wanted to talk to them about the impact this has had, financially, but then much more so just on their lives and how they've kind of coped with this thing that was so central and just such a mainstay and a release for them without having that. And perhaps unsurprisingly, and I have to say that. Maybe I should have been less surprised than I was in reading this. But, so, as with all of us, the pandemic has affected these folks in just a really broad, diverse set of ways. Some people have really navigated it well and found it almost refreshing, having a break from the grind of playing music the way they did. And others, it has been just this created this huge void that left them in a pretty dark place. So there's some folks he talks to, like Lorenza Simmons Phillips, who's I think a pretty well-known singer and vocalist, singer and pianist locally, who really misses live performances, but has also transitioned to focusing more on like one-on-one teaching. with kids, and then also volunteering with the HC Black Music and Arts Association, doing somatic movement and music classes, and has really found other outlets for her passion. And said that kind of it's been a drag, but that she is by and large doing okay. And then there's some other folks who have found an outlet online and have tried to find that live venue community, but in a through a screen like we're doing here, as opposed to a studio. So she talked to Julio Perdido of Los Perdidos, the band, and who's hosting a regular thing at Outer Space on Facebook Live on Sundays at 7, where he jams with other musicians and stuff. Similarly, there's James Zeller, a trombonist, who is working with the Sanctuary's J Street Regular Radio Hour, which is weekdays at 7, and he does regular appearances there, playing with other folks. So there's folks like that who have really found alternate outlets, but that hasn't been the case for everybody.
Yeah, so these creative outlets you described, like just taking advantage of distance technology, weekly streaming on Facebook and YouTube, there is a real resilience there to express people's like I said, creative outlets, creative passion. But you also in the article. There, not you, but Colin actually identified some frustrations too. So from the perspective of some of these artists, that they ran into issues that maybe it impacted everybody slightly differently. But can you tell us a little bit about some of the complications they ran into with being able to express themselves?
Yeah, so I mean, the one anecdote that really kind of struck me was there was a band that played regularly, and one of the members was talking about how they were trying to navigate kind of practicing and like staying the course through the pandemic and doing it in a safe manner. And between bandmates, there was just kind of disagreements about what was safe, and there was some were worried about what activities others were engaged with when they weren't with the band. And they ended up just stopping because it was creating this friction within the band about, what everybody was doing, which is kind of a microcosm of, I think, us as a community in many ways. And I thought that was interesting. And then some folks, also expressed just kind of a dismay at, as I think many of us have, of watching segments of our community kind of carry on and do things against public health guidelines, like gathering socially and stuff like that, while they were trying to be safe and sacrificing this, whether it's sacrificing or having this thing that they love just taken away from them. But they were feeling like we are unable to do what we're born to do as far as play music in live venues and connect with live audiences. And there's other people just carrying on like nothing's going on. They're not wearing masks. They're getting together. They're socializing. And so, that was a tremendous frustration for some. And then he, I think Colin also interestingly talked to some folks who said that I guess before I get to that, he spoke to Amy Hennessy, who is one of the owners of Richard's Goat Tavern, and really captured kind of the venue perspective of what this has been like for a place that really depends on live. Sure, they have a bar and food offerings, but really they depend on live music and movies and events, bringing lots of people together to for their primary revenue stream. And she just talked about how hard it's been, and I think their sales are down 90%. She said, even though they've been serving food to go, outdoor dining, drinks to go. I think they started a line of cocktail popsicles that they were selling. So they really tried to be creative to make it work, but without those performances, it's really been devastating. So I think that covers a lot of the frustration side. I think there were people who also, I think, as I alluded to at the beginning, just kind of said that this isn't something they would have chosen, but that they're finding some peace in it. And that I think one person said, and I can't remember their name offhand, but that they'd always considered themselves a performer, or come to consider themselves a performer, and their lives revolved around these live performances. And that without those, they kind of got back to the music side of things, and that they kind of recentered and playing when they wanted to play and playing for themselves and experimenting with different types of music and stuff, which I thought was neat.
Yeah. So there's growth in isolation somewhat then.
Hmm.
Sorry, I was going to say that I think it was Richard's Goat owner touched on the economic impact. You said like 90% of the business was down. The business was down by 90%.
Hmm.
But I think they also mentioned how, look, these are self-employed people, not just the performers, but the impact ripples through engineers and lighting people and sound people
Hmm.
and road people. You want to talk a little bit about that impact on the broader community, music community?
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think that's an important distinction that I think for a lot of the musicians, this is, as I said, kind of more of passion projects and side hustles than a primary income stream. But for some of these people who do lighting and sound at multiple venues, I mean, this is absolutely an income stream. And that has just been totally gutted. And there's no way for them to shift to, doing Zoom lighting and sound performances or anything like that. It's just they're completely out of work. And Colin's story does really touch on frustrations with the the California Economic Development Department and unemployment reimbursements and stuff, and just how woefully ill prepared it was, not just for the glut of applications, but for dealing with people who are self-employed in various ways or who are scraping together multiple side hustles, including music or including lighting and sound, to get by. And so these folks, I don't think ever were, really made whole, but also faced early on in the pandemic, faced a tremendously frustrating uphill battle of even like, getting people to recognize that they did legitimately qualify. And so I think that was a huge frustration.
And let's pivot to a positive.
Mhm.
There are folks in there, or at least one person I know, mentioned that the future is probably going to be brighter. There is probably going to be another side to all this. And kind of, can you give us some feedback on what that insight was?
Yeah, I thought that was a tremendous ray of sunshine in this piece on two fronts. One is that there's this feeling that by the time we are allowed to fully gather again and bring back live music and especially indoor performances, because most of our venues in Humboldt County are indoors because it's cold at night. Um, but there's this sense that there will be this pent up demand in the populace and that there will just be this resurgence and venues will be, full or at least as to whatever capacity is allowed. And there's just going to be this real desire among folks to get back out and socialize and take in this artistic performance that we've all, I think, really missed, this live in person artistic performance. And so there's a lot of references to it's going to be like the Roaring Twenties all over
Yeah.
again, that people are. Once this feels safe, that people are just going to turn out in droves for it. And I really think that, that was a ray of sunshine. And then on the flip side, for artists, some people really said that like they feel like artists will come out of this invigorated, and that there's been people who maybe haven't been playing but have been thinking about material and kind of as alluding to before, getting back to the creative elements of making music and thinking about it in a different way, and then also not to be crass about what we've all been through or to minimize it or diminutive about it, but like I think there's also this truth that hardship and hard times like yields great artistic creation, and a lot of people process hard things in their lives through making beautiful things. And so I think there's also a feeling that in addition to this pent up demand, that there's going to be artists who have this pent up body of work, or this built up body of work that they're ready to unleash on all of us, which is a really exciting prospect for me anyway.
Well, cool. I think people should check out this article. Like you said, it's really spells it all out, and you get tremendous insight into people's experiences. So thank you.
Yeah, again, I think Colin did an exceptional job. And I guess the last thing I would say is that we are, this article published as we are in this kind of weird transition period where, as of April 1st, outdoor live performances are once again allowed with a lot of restrictions. And then indoor live performances as of the 15th are allowed again with a lot of restrictions again. And so it'll be interesting to see in the coming weeks how we as a community, how artists, how we as art consumers treat kind of this new transition period, and whether how many of us are willing to go out and appreciate those performances and stuff.
Yeah, it's an evolving situation, and I'm
Yeah.
sure you'll let us know. Uh, keep the front lines open for us. And again, North Coast Journal, you guys publicize all these events and on the community calendar, I think it's called, and at least that's where I go to find them.
Yeah, it's a great resource, and it's been limited for a long time now to virtual events, and now we have it's being populated with live events again, which is exciting.
Yeah. Well, cool. I know we just have a limited amount of time left. Is there anything else you want to talk about that's in the North Coast Journal this week before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think the other story I'd really like to highlight is a news piece by Elaine Weinreb, a regular freelancer of ours, who wrote about some woes in the county's code enforcement unit that were presented to the Board of Supervisors last week. So as I think most folks are aware, the county has a code enforcement team. It's within its planning department that is, kind of tasked with going out and dealing mostly with problem properties of one sort or another. So when there's the hoarder living on your street, if you live in an unincorporated area and you want to complain about it, the code enforcement unit is the people you call. Elaine's story actually starts out that if county departments were yards, the code enforcement unit would have so much trash piled up that somebody would call, well, the code enforcement unit. And so basically, as it was presented to the board, the code enforcement unit has just become totally overwhelmed. And every month, they're getting more cases referred to them than they can close. So they just have this constantly growing body of work or backlog of work. And they're just not getting to all these problem properties, which some of which are incredibly problematic. The story, I don't mean to laugh, but it's just the scope of it is kind of you either laugh or cry. But the story touches on a property along the Van Dusen River that had more than 400 junk vehicles on it, 200 appliances. I mean, you can just imagine the scope of what this must look like. And so I think this is a good example, while extreme, of just how much work is involved in cleaning up one of these properties. And so when a case is referred to code enforcement, they first try to work with the landowner to get them to come into compliance with county codes voluntarily. But even if somebody's willing to do that, I mean, with a property like that, you see just how hugely time-consuming and labor-intensive it must be to clean up some of these properties. And so the story really just goes into how overwhelmed this unit is. I think they only have, for traditional code enforcement functions, I think they only have 4 people working on them. Oh, wow. And again, these are cases that have a bureaucratic end of just tons of paperwork and tons of process, a legal end of having to go through the courts to get orders to clean up these properties, and then just the physical labor end of actually doing the work. And then the other end of the code enforcement team deals with cannabis cases now. A lot of that has been taken out of the realm of law enforcement and put to code enforcement, where I think most people, agree it should be at this point. We don't. I think we're past the day and age of armed raids on properties, thankfully. But it does mean that these same bureaucratic processes have to be put in place to deal with unlicensed cannabis grows, some of which, as we know, are huge. So I think it's an interesting look in just the daunting challenge that the code enforcement unit faces.
So in our last closing minute or two, what did the article say about the report was presented to the supervisors, but then what's next, or what kind of feedback did it receive at that level?
Yeah, so it's this was an annual report, so it wasn't an action item or something like that, but it seems like there wasn't like a huge call to action after this was presented. That some of the board members kind of had questions about specific aspects of it. Supervisor Bushnell asked about doing aerial surveillance of cannabis farms and using that as a tool. But there was no kind of call to arms as to, we need to increase funding for the code enforcement unit. We need more boots on the ground. We need this or that. It was kind of the last line in the story is that, the report was accepted and no action was taken.
And so it goes.
And so it goes, yeah.
Well, again, if it's an annual report, I guess at some point we'll hear back on progress or impact or, next steps. Thanks again for all that you guys do for us there at North Coast Journal.
Thanks, David.
Well, that's about going to do it for us this week. North Coast Journal is on newsstands right now. Pick one up, stay informed, find them online. Thad, thanks so much again, and we will all see you again here next week.
Always a pleasure, David.
Bye, take care.